We're going to go ahead and get going. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the January 5th meeting of the Thurston County Solid Waste Advisory Committee. Happy New Year. Thanks for being here. We have a quorum of the board. I'm going to go ahead and call through the roll, and I'm going to ask a few folks to let me know if they know about the appointment from their jurisdiction as I go through the roll call. So I'm Jim Cooper from the City of Olympia, the chair for this meeting, and then I'll be termed out. And let's see, Joan. I don't see Joan, but we know she is reappointed by the City of Tumwater at this point. Carolina, what's your status of appointment? Welcome.
Hi, Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner, and I am reappointed to this committee again. So.
Got it. Thank you. Welcome. I'm glad to have you. Do we have Ed? No Ed. Cutter? No Cutter. James? Steve? Joe? No Joe. Okay. Greg?
I'm here.
Welcome.
I'm here.
You're good on your term. So Richard?
I'm here.
Okay. You're solid on your term. And then Renee, you're recently reappointed. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back. Delroy.
Here.
Chad?
Yep.
Olivia from Ecology?
I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have vacant City of Rainier and still a vacant business interest. So do you have any updates on any of those appointments, Amanda?
No, I do not. We haven't heard anything.
Okay. All right, so we will check in with jurisdictions that we're waiting to hear from and go ahead and move on with the meeting. Let's see, let's do introductions of county staff. Jeff?
Sure, I'll start. Jeff Bickford, Solid Waste Manager. All right, and let's see, we'll move down to Amanda.
She waved at us.
Okay.
And also Rick Thomas. I am actually filling in for Susan Eicham to do the capital projects update later.
Cool. And Rick, your name is showing Amanda Romero. So if you want to change that, that'd be solid. Solid.
Right, boy, there are a lot of Amandas out there today, aren't there?
I see Patrick Soderberg on here.
Yep, Patrick Soderberg, Thurston County Solid and Hazardous Waste Program.
And I see Art Starry.
And I'm Art Starry with Thurston County Environmental Health.
And Chris Hawkins.
Good morning, Chris Hawkins here from Thurston County Public Health and Social Services Education Prevention Team.
And Corey Lee.
Good morning, everybody. Thurston County Public Works Office Assistant.
And Rob Pudner.
Morning, I'm Rob Pudner, Education and Outreach Specialist with Thurston County Public Works.
Video star.
And I think, am I missing anybody here from the county? I think that's it.
Okay. Guests. What guests are on? Paul, we'll introduce you. Go ahead.
Jeff Harwood, LeMay Pacific Disposal.
Welcome, Jeff.
Did you want me to introduce myself?
You might as well. You're talking now.
Sure. Paul Jewell, Washington State Association of Counties. I'm a policy director handling water, land use, natural resources, and environmental issues, and solid waste is in my portfolio.
Welcome, Paul. Anyone else that has not introduced? Okay, let's move on then. Is everyone okay with the agenda we have in front of us?
Yes.
Anything we need to change? Okay, we have an agenda. I need a motion to approve the minutes from November 3rd, please.
I make the motion to approve minutes.
I'll second. Greg?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any amendments? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Do we have any public comment? I guess that would be you, Jeff, if you had any. Okay. That takes us to no old business, new business. Okay, so our bylaws say that we were supposed to elect a chair and vice chair today. We still have several of the local jurisdiction appointees who are unknown at this point. And so what we discussed in November was taking a motion to suspend the rules to delay the elections of officers until the February meeting when the board body is known, when we know the members of the body. So if that still is the pleasure of the advisory committee, then I would be looking for a motion to suspend the rules to delay the officer elections until February. And that will require a 2/3 majority to suspend the rules.
Um,
move we suspend the rules.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, a brief discussion. It'll probably be covered later when we address the bylaws, but and I think when we were discussing that, we were talking about, I think, Jim, you made the suggestion that it might be wise to correct that for future elections because of the same situation.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, since we're going to open them up, we can look at that in a few minutes if we need to. Thanks, Delroy. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we'll do our officer elections at our February meeting. So that takes us to the legislative pre-session update from Paul Jewell from the Washington State Association of Counties. Paul, tell us what you have today.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me back. Do you want me to share my screen, Amanda, or are you going to put the presentation up?
If you'd like to share your screen, that works just fine with me.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that then. Just trying to make sure I share the right one, guys. Hang on a second. Sorry about this. My first time on Zoom, obviously. Just kidding. You're not seeing the right version, I don't think. Yeah.
We just see the fish, whichever screen that is on.
It's a beautiful fish, isn't it?
That is a beautiful fish.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I caught that in Rock Creek, Montana.
Makes me want to go fishing.
Me too. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that, guys. I am trying to do it a different way than I normally do it, and I shouldn't be doing that, I'm sure. There we go, bringing it up. Always a glitch right at the new year, right? Okay, I think I've got this thing figured out now. All right, you should be seeing it now. Is that right?
There we go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I appreciate you indulging me. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to come speak with you. I'm actually in Olympia today, so I'm right in your neck of the woods. Glad to see not so much ice on the road this morning as I drove up from Offutt Lake. That was quite an ice rink yesterday morning, and I'm sure many of you experienced the same thing. I'm going to talk to you today just kind of about what to expect during this year's upcoming legislative session. We've got really, we were anticipating some changes this year from what we experienced last year, but it looks like actually we're going to be kind of back in the same boat as we were. The legislative session begins next week on Monday. It's a short 60-day session this year, and it'll end right towards the beginning of March, right on March 10th. So January 10th to March 10th. It's only 60 days. And if you've ever experienced a short legislative session, you know that it's very intense and very fast paced. So we're expecting the same thing this year, of course. It's also an election year this year, which means that the entire House of Representatives and half of the Senate will be up for election in November. That tends to kind of change the way a legislative session might go. It's very unlikely it'll go long. That's good news for people like us. It also tends to temper people's willingness to take on more controversial items and tax increases because, of course, those things are fresh in voters' minds from a controversial standpoint as some of your elected officials might be facing the ballot in November. At the same time, it's kind of unusual this year because we're on the 10-year cycle for redistricting, and some of the existing members actually have already been potentially redistricted out of their elective offices, and so they will be running maybe in new areas or not at all, or for new seats. So there definitely will be a shuffle, and it's hard to say how that will affect the legislative session, but it does have the potential to do that as people look towards the future. With regard to state revenues and the state budget, there's good news there. There's a revenue forecast coming up, but so far all indications are that revenues are continuing to climb, not decline. Make sure that I enunciate properly. So a lot of the discussions around supplemental budgets will be about how to spend more money, not where to make cuts. Generally, that's a more pleasant discussion, but not always, I'm sure, as you can imagine. But that is good news for many of our state agencies, and certainly good news for solid waste. We were expecting a bit of a virtual / in-person or hybrid session where you would be able to make in-person meetings with legislators, and we would see more legislators on campus and more activity this year. Not quite like a normal year, but a little bit more normal than we saw last year. Unfortunately, with the current state of the pandemic and the Omicron variant kind of making its way across the globe the way that it has, both House and Senate are pivoting back essentially to where they were last year. Now that's a good news, bad news scenario. All of the committee meetings and hearings will all be virtual. So you'll have access no matter where you are, really in the state or frankly anywhere in the world. If you've got good internet access, you can testify remotely. That led to a lot more participation last year, which was definitely a good thing. The bad thing is sometimes those hearings get pretty crowded as far as people who want to testify, and it doesn't necessarily give an opportunity for everyone to have meaningful input, especially since they're really limited in what they can do kind of in the background as well. In past years, if you've been involved in the legislative process, just as much goes on in the hallways as does go on in those hearing rooms. And of course, the hallways are eliminated at this point. So it will make it a premium to have information on how to contact your legislator. If anybody needs help with that, certainly let me know. I can help reach out and give you some information on how you might be able to contact someone if you're struggling. But it does put a premium on those who have some of that knowledge and ability to get things done. So that's what we're expecting as far as the legislative session, kind of in general. Let's talk about bills that are dealing with solid waste. And we do expect it to be a pretty robust year for solid waste related bills. And we've seen some already pre-filed. In fact, strangely enough, there's been hundreds of bills pre-filed already. As of last night, there were already 337 different bill proposals pre-filed, meaning that they haven't officially been dropped, but they've been sent to the code revisor's office and they've been drafted and they're ready to go and they've been assigned a number. Of those 337, only 3 so far really deal with solid waste issues. The first one is House Bill 1663. This is dealing with landfill methane emissions. It really is a trailer bill to the Climate Commitment Act that was passed last year. This bill is by Representative Dewar. I've spoken with her about it and Representative Fitzgibbon, who is the House Environment and Energy Committee, and both of them have been pretty involved in this bill. It really takes a look at landfills in kind of a new way. And certain size landfills with certain amounts of methane gas production will have to install gas collection facilities. And that includes active landfills as well as closed and inactive landfills. There are requirements in the law that gas collection continue for at least 15 years or until it goes below a certain level. If you'll remember in the Climate Commitment Act, there original versions, and there were a lot of versions to look at last year, but original versions actually implicated landfills over a certain size and would have required them to actually buy shares of emissions during the auction process like any other emitting business or industrial facility. We really advocated against that because landfills are receivers of waste. They're not necessarily, product producers. They're not operating generally at a profit, especially if they're owned by a city or county. And they're really kind of a necessary item for public health, safety, and welfare. And counties, in many cases, would be the ones that would have to buy those emission shares and basically add that kind of to their operating costs and turn that cost over to ratepayers. And we do that because we're mandated to do that from the state's out of state law. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a little bit more thought put into what we might do with landfill emissions. Now, methane is an important thing to consider when you're considering climate change and the impacts of greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. Methane is known as a short-lived climate pollutant. It's much more potent than carbon dioxide. The statistics will vary from 25 times to 80 times more potent or more, and I think it probably depends on the quality of the methane itself. But they call it a short-lived climate pollutant because it eventually turns into carbon dioxide. But because it's more potent, it actually contributes significantly to short-term temperature increases within the climate change scenarios. So dealing with methane effectively actually gives us more time to deal with the larger issue of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in general. And so from that point of view, it's kind of low-hanging fruit from a climate change standpoint with policy development. And so that's why it's being looked at. This particular bill would actually kind of create this process for dealing with methane from certain size landfills. I would assume Thurston County's landfill is probably implicated here because it's fairly good sized. I don't have the list of exactly what landfills would be required to meet these new regulations, but I assume yours would. And it really replaces what we ended up with in the Climate Commitment Act, which was kind of a 10-year window to adopt a statewide policy dealing with emissions from landfills and not have to buy those shares of emissions on the open market or during the auction. So it's an alternative way to deal with that. Senate Bill 5492. I know that was a complex bill, and if you have questions about that, let me know. Senate Bill 5492 is a bill that we've seen in the past. This essentially would implement a product stewardship program for the recycling of wind turbine blades. As of 2024, 2025, I can't remember what's in the bill. Any blade, wind turbine blade that is installed or sold in Washington State must be part of the product stewardship program. Product stewardship programs are, of course, programs that take on the cost of dealing with the end of life or recycling of whatever product that they make from a manufacturer standpoint. It puts manufacturers in charge of the responsibility of doing that from a cost perspective. And then Senate Bill 5500 is a bill that we've also seen before in the past, and it would actually mandate that the Department of Ecology work with the Department of Transportation to facilitate cleanup of state highways during road closures for projects and things like that. Right now, state law allows Ecology. It says Ecology may coordinate with WashDOT. This would actually require them to do so. So those are the three bills that we have seen introduced so far. But they're not the only ones that we expect. I told you this was going to be a fairly robust session around solid waste, and we are expecting some other really big bills to come forward. And I know some of these are actually being drafted as we speak. They're over at the co-revisor's office. So even though they haven't been pre-filed yet, we may yet see them this week, or they'll be very early in the session. The first one is the Renew Act, and this is a really big bill. My understanding is the latest version I saw was about 78 pages. My understanding is that it's now 90 pages. So for those of you who really love to read bills, this is a great one to curl up to. on a Sunday evening when maybe you're Netflixed out and you've got a cup of tea and you really just want to have some fun. This bill does a lot. It's a complex proposal that would create what's called an extended producer responsibility program for product packaging and for paper products in Washington State. Product stewardship and EPR really kind of get confused a little bit. Product stewardship deals with, they're very similar in that, basically it says, the manufacturers have to form these associations that are really responsible for kind of taking on the end of life of certain projects or products. EPR is based on the premise, and there's subtle differences here, but EPR is based on the premise that the primary responsibility for the waste generated during the production process is given to the manufacturers. Basically, soup to nuts, the whole ball of wax. This includes all responsibility for treatment and for disposal, post-treatment of post-consumer products. This bill would establish that program for product packaging, as I said, and for paper products. And for many counties, this program would fundamentally change the way that current products are being recycled or the way they go to landfills and who's responsible for handling them. In Thurston County, in some areas, you may find that this is very impactful. In some areas, you may not. It proposes for many counties to require curbside recycling be offered in areas, in all areas where curbside garbage collection is also offered. Now, I know you guys do that a lot already in Thurston County, but a lot of Washington State counties in the unincorporated areas don't necessarily do that. It also proposes that counties be entitled to funding from the program for the services that they provide for the program. So you can contract with the program to provide many of the same services that you already do, like Dropbox locations and things like that, or maybe collection events, and that your costs would be covered for doing that, including labor costs, which is an improvement in this program compared to some of the other programs that are currently in place for product stewardship. The program sets recyclable and reuse goals for consumer packaging and paper products to be 90% by 2040. So that's obviously a pretty lofty goal. It also includes new PCR or product post-consumer content requirement regulations for different types of plastics that weren't addressed in last year's bill. And those include thermoforms, tubs like cottage cheese and yogurt containers and things like that, and roll carts. Roll carts, of course, are the things that you put your garbage or your recycling in or your green waste in, and you roll it out to the corner for the curbside recycling or garbage collection service to come pick it up. The bill also includes new truth in labeling requirements that prohibit deceptive or misleading claims about the recyclability of a product or its packaging. And I think that's everything in case that's not enough in the bill. As I mentioned, it was 78 pages long, the last version I saw, but I understand it's about 90 now. And it's a big bill. I'd be surprised if it didn't get a lot of discussion this year. There already are some pretty significant stakeholders that are coming out against the bill. They've submitted comments to the lead sponsor, who is Senator Mona Das. I've seen some of those comments. So it will be controversial and there'll be a lot to discuss. The next one that I want to mention is a battery stewardship bill. This is a stewardship program, not unlike EPR or the one that I talked about for the wind turbine blades, dealing mostly with lithium ion batteries in the waste stream. Those are actually a fire hazard for landfills and for MRFs and things like that. And so this would create a product stewardship program for that. I'm going to skip organics management because I'm going to go back to that. The fourth one on the list there is a right to repair bill. And this is a bill that would authorize and require manufacturers to allow consumers the ability to access certain products and repair them that they don't currently have access to. And this is mostly like devices with screens, like your cell phones, your tablets, some of your smaller laptops and things like that, that really, if they go bad, they're pretty much junk. You would need some sort of specialized tool to even get into them, and they don't sell the parts generally to fix them other than maybe the screen. So this would create a new right to repair for consumers so that you don't necessarily have to throw those things away. They end up in the waste stream and buy something new. And then the last one is a plastics and truth in labeling bill. And this is an alternative to the Renew Act that's probably going to be introduced by one of the stakeholders who opposes the Renew Act, to just pull out the new PCR requirements for plastics and the truth in labeling piece and offer that as a separate bill that might find its way through the legislative session with a little less controversy than the entire Renew Act. The last thing I want to talk about is organics management. Organics is a big issue. It's one that we've been discussing a lot, really since the food waste recovery bill was passed in 2000 and I think 17 or 18 by one of your representatives. I can't remember. I'm sorry. She's great, and I'm really embarrassed that I'm forgetting her name right now. She ran for Congress and is no longer a House member. It'll come to me.
Dolio.
Yes, Beth Dolio. I'm embarrassed that I forgot that because she was so great to work with. Don't tell her if you run into her that I forgot her name in front of you guys. But yeah, Beth Dolio introduced a bill that was passed a few years ago on food waste recovery in Washington State and set a long-term goal for improving that. This is kind of a trailer to that, and we've been talking about organics management since then. And I know many of you have been talking about organics management, but it really came to a head last year during conversations around the Climate Commitment Act. It's important to know that organics are really the source of methane production in landfills, and they represent about 33% of the current waste stream. And so we've been talking about alternative ways to manage organics, whether it be getting them out of the waste stream, taking them out of landfills and managing them in a different way, or actually through food rescue programs, either for human consumption or for livestock consumption, or ways to prevent food waste from occurring in the first place, right? Which is always the best policy. If you can prevent it from occurring in the first place, that's what you should do. This bill actually seeks to do all of those things. Originally, they were just going to do some food waste recovery and some prevention regulations in this bill, or some new laws around that, but they've decided to throw everything into this bill. And the current version that I have is 54 pages. I'll bet you money that it's going to get a lot bigger than that before the end of the day. It's going to be sponsored by Representative Fitzgibbon, and it's going to be an all-inclusive organics management bill that will do several different things. First of all, it proposes new requirements for compostable plastics and a 75% reduction in landfill disposal of organic materials by a yet to be determined date. So we don't know when that date is. It also sets a goal that no less than 20% of edible food be recovered for human consumption, I think by 2025 or 2026. Organic material in the bill is defined as including but not limited to manure, yard debris, food waste, food processing waste, wood waste, and garden waste. And I know that most counties are already dealing with many of those organic wastes from a yard waste, lumber, garden waste point of view. It's really the food waste here that's going to be a big change for a lot of communities and a lot of counties, and will probably be the most controversial piece. It proposes to require that all counties with a population of more than 75,000 people and a population density of more than 75 people per square mile provide organic solid waste collection services to all residents, curbside, and businesses, and provide for separate management of organics. And when we're talking about separate organic material management, we're talking about composting, anaerobic digesting, permaculture composting, black soldier fly composting, or similar techniques. You want to know what black soldier fly composting is? Think really big, fat, happy little maggots consuming organic material and turning it into compost. Same thing with vermicomposting, only using earthworms. It includes some protections also for new businesses for existing businesses and new businesses that donate food items that might be past their labeling date as far as when it says use by, et cetera. We find that oftentimes food is actually good for a significant period of time after that use by label, but businesses are hesitant to donate many of those items because of liability concerns. This would create some new protections from them or for them. It also includes new requirements for organic management by businesses. Restaurants and grocery stores generate, as you might imagine, a lot of organic waste. The bill creates the Washington Center for Sustainable Food Management. The purpose of the center is to help coordinate statewide food waste reduction It also includes some changes to the GMA to require that comprehensive plans and development regulations within communities allow the siting of organic material management facilities, so composting, anaerobic digestion, et cetera. And it also includes some compost procurement requirements by local governments, meaning the city of Olympia, Thurston County, city of Rainier, et cetera, would be forced under the bill to actually purchase finished compost equal to about 75% of what your system delivers to compost processing facilities. That's something that we adamantly oppose as the Association of Counties. We don't think it's appropriate to necessarily just create arbitrary amounts for governments to buy and stockpile. We would rather see regulations that require us to use compost instead of other materials in parks, facilities, event facilities, landscaping facilities, and include them in contracts for different types of projects where ground cover is required, where stormwater control measures are required. Use composting instead of other materials in those instances, and let that demand drive the market. They're clearly trying to create a significant amount of demand by creating commercial, consumers in the form of government agencies to justify the large amounts of compost that are essentially going to result from this program. Now, we're not necessarily opposed to changing the way we manage organics. We think getting organics out of the waste stream is a really important part of dealing with climate change. They are the source for methane emissions from landfills, and we want to make sure that our landfills are as clean as possible and that we find a way to address those methane emissions. We just want to make sure that we do it in a way that works for everybody. So those are the bills that we are expecting this year. All of those I know will be introduced. There are some other considerations that we're working on that kind of underlie some of these. When I actually put this program together, food waste was not going to be included in that organics bill, but that has changed since then. That's how fast things can change here during a short session, even the run up to it. But I do want to talk about funding of local programs. One of the things that especially counties deal with as far as funding for local programs is we really have just a few funding sources. Obviously, we get quite a bit of funding from the state in the form of the local solid waste financial assistance grants. Those are funded by the Model Toxics Control Program, or MOTCA, through the hazardous substances tax. The majority of the hazardous substances tax is paid by petroleum that comes into Washington state. That petroleum, of course, goes into our vehicles primarily, and the state has a policy of trying to reduce our use of fossil fuels over a period of time through electrification and other means, whether it's heating oil or whether it's natural gas or whether it is motor oil or gasoline. We expect the use through those policies in Washington state to actually decline over time. And we're seeing long-term projections for the MOTCA account reflect those policy changes. Right now, there's a lot of competition for MOTCA, and we actually see our ability to continue to receive those funds long-term declining significantly as we look into the future. The other major resource that we have from a county perspective for receiving revenue for support of our solid waste programs is this kind of almost perverse incentive to send things over our scales, right, to get tipping fees. And as we think about things like EPR programs for product packaging and paper, removing more and more of those items from our landfill streams to recycling and reuse streams, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, from an environmental standpoint. And we look at, finding ways to manage organics or reduce or prevent organic waste from occurring, which represents about 33% of our waste stream right now. We are going to be looking at a lot less material going into the landfills, hopefully over the next several years, but also a lot less material and a lot less weight going over our scales, which really undermines our ability to fund and manage our programs. And so we are trying to figure out new ways to think outside the box, so to speak, and figure out how we're going to fund solid waste programs and our solid waste management plans into the future. And so we'll be asking for some funding this year from the legislature to help us through a process to kind of strategize and research and develop new methods for funding our programs at an appropriate level, given a lot of the new policy changes that we're anticipating taking place and being implemented in Washington State over the next several years. And that's all I have for you today. Here's my contact information. You can reach out to me at any time. I'm here, really 5 days a week, but during the session, almost 7 days a week, as I mentioned. So feel free to reach out either via email or text or telephone. I'm happy to chat with anybody. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll answer any questions now that you might have.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Paul, I'm curious if you're hearing any rumblings about a reemergence of a product stewardship program for sharps.
I'm not hearing one this year, but I do know that's on the radar for many of the different stakeholder groups. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that next year. Next year, of course, is the start of the biennial session again, right? And I should have mentioned, all the bills that didn't pass last year, of course, are alive and well for this legislative session and can be pulled at any time and become part of the discussion. So I don't think we're going to see that bill this year, but we will see it again at some point in the future, probably the near future.
Is that why it died in 2020, because of the fiscal note?
Probably.
Okay.
There was a lot of discussion last year around a whole bunch of different things. You're talking 2020, not 2021. But yeah, probably in 2020, it probably died because of the fiscal note. There's only so much bandwidth too, right, through a legislative session to kind of push things through, and they were more focused on some bigger fish, so to speak. Sharps is not always the most popular discussion, not just because it's about, there's without going into the controversy, you're all elected officials, you know why it's not always the most popular discussion, but it definitely is needed. We need to manage that waste in an effective way, and I think a product stewardship program is a good way to do that. I know our members would support it.
Okay. Well, and maybe that when the AG goes to the bank with the Sackler family money, eventually that could be a something that the state could use right away. Because from our perspective in an urban area, it's more common than cans on the ground at this point, and it's not even just heroin addicts. There's just nowhere for people to put their sharps. So
yeah, I've certainly, when I've been out and about, I've actually noticed an uptick as well. We don't necessarily. One of the things that we need too is just receptacles, right? And there definitely is a desire and a need for those. I think that would be a good start, even if we can't get a product stewardship program in place, to get more of a funding program for adequate receptacles to be in place so that people can dispose of them responsibly. Okay. For sure.
Yeah, can you let Gary and Ron and me know from Olympia standpoint if you hear any rumblings, and I'll pass it on to SWAC about
sure,
that?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Because even if somebody's thinking about it, I think you'd have a pretty big delegation from our area be ready to help.
You bet.
Okay. Anything else for Paul?
Good to see everybody.
Okay, thank you, sir. Really appreciate it.
Happy 2022.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Good luck. Okay, so that takes us to our bylaws. Jeff, tell us what we have here.
Certainly. Okay, well, I sent out let me back up. We had a briefing with the Board of County Commissioners back in beginning of December, and that basically taking what this group had recommended up to the board. There was a recommendation from the commissioners to change a specific sentence, which is in section 2C terms. There was some wording that they would like to have seen changed, and it's on the piece that I sent out. It's highlighted in yellow. So the revised sentence was it has to do with the filling of vacant seats, and it kind of came up a little bit when we were talking about people's terms earlier. But the revised wording being, a vacancy, if filled, shall be for the remainder of the term of the vacant position in the manner described for an initial appointment. And but if you read the red line before that, it says a vacancy shall be filled for the remainder. So the question from the board was that with that previous wording, does that require us to make that appointment? But so thus allowing if filled, and so there's that desire. And so it's a minor change, but it was, substantive enough that they would want to see that change made. So with that, when to bring it back to you, and I know we gave, and then there were some, while we were at it, we just changed, you'll see the other pieces highlighted in yellow, just for consistency's sake, where we had the words Board of County Commissioners written out, and we abbreviated it. Those already defined early on in the document. So just to be consistent, because you'll notice SWAC is defined early, and then it's consistently made an acronym later. So we gave you more than 30 days notice of this change, so that we would, if you decided to vote on it today, that we've given the due notice to make that change. But I did hear earlier on that you might have another potential change you might want to make. So from what Delroy talked about, which would be in section 2D.
Yes.
Because we were talking, which is in the second sentence, which currently state, elections shall be held at the first regularly scheduled meeting after January 1st of each year. So, that's a discussion for you if you desire to make that change. If you do want to make a change to that, of course, we would need to, once again, give another 30-day notice to do that, which means our next meeting is February 2nd. We do not have 30 days. So you mean we'd be able to readdress this at the March meeting. So just that, as far as process goes, if you care to make that change, that would be what we would need to do. So leave it up to you guys to discuss how you would like to proceed.
Well, so let me see if anybody can help me with the parliamentary clarification. So our amendment clause says that we just have to give 15 days notice to SWAC in writing before undertaking a mandatory action. So to me, that's generalized and not the specific amendment. So does that mean that an amendment on the floor, if notice has been given, could happen, or we would need to go back out for another month of waiting? Does anybody have been through that before?
If I don't mind, I have to make a slight amendment to what you just said. The 15 days is what you have proposed. It's not what has been.
Oh, it hasn't been approved yet. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was 30 before, right?
We're still at 30 until
Okay.
this is approved.
So my belief is that if once it's open and we've noticed it, we can make that amendment on the floor in the meeting. Does anybody disagree?
And I'm not a parliamentarian, so if anybody else has any other information related to that, that would be helpful.
Well, why don't we go ahead and do it if we desire, and then if the county lawyers tell us we need to reapprove it next month, we'll just do that. Does that sound good?
Good to me.
Okay. So then I just looking at the language to help expedite things, if the board is interested, or if the committee is interested, I think we can add in that sentence, elections shall be held at the first regularly scheduled meeting. We could say at the first or second regularly scheduled meeting. And that would be a simple amendment that would give us an option. Is that something that you would want to do, Delroy?
I think it adds some flexibility to it, and everybody knows we need our to be as flexible as possible.
Okay.
So I mean, that sounds good to me. I think it's a good idea to run it past the attorney to make sure that it's kosher.
Okay. Yeah, and that'll have to happen before it can go to the commission anyway, I would assume. Like somebody's going to look at it. So, Renee?
I don't want to complicate things, but do we want to add a little bit of language about why we're doing this so that the jurisdictions can make their appointments to the SWAC, so we know who the membership's going to be? That might make it a little easier for the attorneys to say, yeah, okay.
I agree. I think that needs to be in there. And it'll also give us the opportunity to to discuss the issues at the first meeting of the year. And then following up what Renee said is that everybody would have a better idea who would be possible contenders.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm pausing because I'm trying to frame the language in my head. Maybe a parens that says something like upon appointment of local jurisdiction members.
Yeah, something like that. You know, the other thing, the presentation we just had from Paul's was really interesting, and having an opportunity to do that at our first meeting might kind of drive who is really interested in leadership roles. For instance, Jim, you brought up some of the issues that Olympia is facing around sharps. And if that's an issue, you may want to take more of a leadership role that year. So I think some of that information is valuable to have as people are thinking about running for some of these roles.
Okay. Well, so that makes sense. So, I mean, you could say following a discussion of the annual work plan and appointments of local elected officials, so that
makes sense.
You actually would vote for the officers after we know what we're doing for the year, or roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
I mean, a new chairman will want to put their signature on our work plan too, and I get that. But I think it's easier for people to step up to a commitment if they know it's relevant for them.
Yeah, and if we say following a discussion, there's no mandate to adopt anything. We just would discuss it before we do the officer elections. Okay. Okay, so then what I'm tracking is elections shall be held at the first or second regularly scheduled meeting after January 1st of each year, comma, following a discussion of the annual work plan and appointment of local elected officials to the committee by the BOCC.
I would be willing to make that recommendation following what you said.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
Okay. So we have a second, and this is a pre-amendment, so we don't have a motion. So just kind of, I was okay with consensus, but since you have a motion, let me make sure. Amanda, is the wording clear from your end?
Yeah, I understand it, and I'm just checking in with our admin, Corey, to make sure she's got it all taken down so we can make sure it gets drafted properly. So if Jeff's on board, I'm on board.
Okay, Jeff, are you okay tracking where we are?
Yeah, as long as Corey gets the wording right. I'm going to have her read it back to you just to make sure that she has the wording correctly.
Thank you.
I definitely do not have verbatim exactly what you want. So if you want to reread that, that would be great.
You assume I wrote it down.
Oh.
Okay, so I have election shall be held at the first or second regularly scheduled meeting after January 1st of each year, comma, following a discussion of the annual work plan and appointments of local elected officials to the committee by the BOCC, period.
Okay.
Annual work plan and, sorry.
And election and appointments of local elected officials by the BOCC.
To the committee.
To the committee by the BOCC. See, thanks, Jeff.
I think I've got it too now.
Okay.
Okay, appointments of local officials to the committee by the BOCC.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that amendment? And is there any discussion about, oh wait, we have that as an amendment to the proposal before the proposal goes to the body. Is there any further discussion of this motion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay. So we have an amendment to the proposal from staff and the Board of County Commissioners And so I'd be looking for a motion to approve the proposed bylaws amendments as amended upon conditional on the approval of council and the Board of County Commissioners.
Also move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So Jeff, just let us know if the lawyers think we need to do it again, and we'll just bring it back on February's agenda.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, and I think we might be all right. So but yeah, we'll let you know and we'll move it forward.
I think we did okay. We're just an
think so.
advisory committee too, so I might have overthought that, but who knows?
Loosely.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. Hopefully that is our last moment with those bylaws for a minute, but if we need to, we'll keep up with them. They are our governing document and they live as times change. So thanks a lot for supporting us through that, staff. So we're going to go to Rick now for a capital projects update. Rick.
All right, well, good morning. And Amanda, I believe that you have the presentation. All right.
Can everyone see it?
It's not in the presentation mode yet, but we can see it.
Great, thank you.
There you go.
All right. Okay, well, let me give an update in regards to where we are on our capital program. And I think you're all familiar with the chart that we have up here showing the kind of the 5 different categories that we're tracking. I'm going to go to the next slide. We're going to start talking about these projects in detail. So the first project is our ongoing Scada project. And the project submittals right now are being developed and reviewed. And everything is still on track to be completed by the end of this fall, maybe early winter. But so far, so good. I got a really great contractor, and they've been working through quite a few of the shipping and a lot of issues having to do with supply chain. So far, they're keeping that one on track. There haven't been any significant change orders at all, and it's just a matter of continuing the process. Our next project is our flare systems project, replacing what we have out there. And this one has run into a little bit of delay with the supply chain, although, and Jeff, you could fill us in a little bit on this, but Jeff got a message this morning from the contractor that they, in fact, do have all their parts and pieces now, and the flares are being assembled on their skids, and they're going to be doing some final commissioning before they actually bring them out to be installed. So, Jeff, I don't know, is there anything else that you would like to add to this one?
Sure. And what Rick mentioned has been key. Actually, those skids with those flares were supposed to have been delivered in October. But there's been several parts that they just have not been able to get. But I did understand this morning that they finally got the last few pieces that they needed to assemble just within the last couple of days. So they're expecting those skids to get delivered near the end of this month because they have to do assembly and testing right now. So it put us a couple of months behind what we were expecting. It was supposed to be done by the end of the year, but now we're probably looking into March-ish or so. So we got caught up with the supply chain thing, but it's other than that, it's moving forward and looking good so far.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Here's an update on our pump systems. We are right now in the middle of our pump design. We are having our 30% design review with the design team and our technicians tomorrow, with the anticipation that the design will actually be complete by June of this year. And we're already starting to put a plan together in regards to permitting. Assuming everything continues on track, we should be able to put our contract out for award and construction in 2023. So everything is looking good there. The The board did approve the budget for the construction. And so right now it's just a matter of keeping things on track, and so far it's looking good. The Rochester and Rainier Dropbox sites projects, again, there hasn't been much change on this. Well, there has been no change on this in regards to the actual Dropbox projects themselves. They've been on hold for several months while HDR has been doing kind of an investigative study for potential mini work in the South County area. There's 2 potential sites that have been kind of narrowed down, and they're developing their schematic drawings and some potential costs for us to review. So again, Jeff, I know that you may have a little bit more detail on this. So if there's more to share, please do.
Yeah, we're close to moving forward, potentially looking at some stakeholder engagement and public outreach on looking at these options. I'll have more to tell you next month on it, actually.
Okay, sounds great.
Just real quick, do we have site control or not?
Are you saying, do we own both the sites? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
We own one of them.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
The next one is our site security and technology upgrades project. And again, this is kind of a conglomeration of several smaller types of projects. Just give you an update on kind of the newer items that are going on. We did award a contract to do some lighting improvements, and the contractor will be out by the end of January to do some of the infrastructure work. And then the new pole has been on ordered, and it should be here in probably the March to April timeframe. Again, one of those supply chain things where typically we could get a pole in about 3 months, but it's about 6 months these days. So, but that's underway. Our IT group is working closely with us to look at security upgrades for the work as well as at Rochester and Rainier. And so we anticipate that continuing on through the summer. We've already noted, I believe before, that the fence in the access control is really going to be incorporated into our work master plan project rather than trying to kind of piecemeal it out at this point. And then the last item, the water towers have been fully commissioned and removed and recycled. So we at least have that part of the site cleaned up. It was a good project to get done before the end of the year. And then the last project obviously is our large master plan conceptual plan for the work itself. Again, 2 concepts have been developed, and more conversation in regards to just pricing and which one makes the most sense. And Jeff, I know you've been very much involved in the details going forward. Are there any decisions or milestones that would be for the betterment of the group today?
Well, right now, and of course, this group has seen the 2 options that were available, one which involved adding to the existing transfer station, and one that was more just kind of creating a public tipping area, similar to what we have up top, but down in a new area over on regular or solid ground. So there was a substantive difference in the construction costs between those 2 options. What we have right now is we're getting some estimates from the hauler or the contractor, or basically, or the people who run the facility, on what would the difference be. Okay, sure, that's the construction of the cost for the facility, but what would be the cost to operate? There's going to be, well, one will cost more to construct, it will probably cost less to operate versus the one that's less expensive to build will probably cost more because there's going to be more transferring of vehicles. So we're getting that information currently. We should have that hopefully in the near future, so we know what operating costs will be different, how that will be differentially different. So that adds into the whole picture. So we're waiting for that information to come to us, and then that will help guide our decisions. So more on that soon as well.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And that's it in regards to the the update to our capital projects program. And if you have any questions, be happy to try to answer them for you.
Capital questions for Rick. Thank you, Rick. It's really helpful to have the information in the packet. So appreciate that.
Our pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so that takes us to our manager's update. And in the chat, I asked Jeff to bring up the work plan since it was in our packet, but not on the agenda. And we just made a bylaws amendment that says we should talk about it. So Jeff, do you want to start there?
Certainly. I'm actually going to punt this to Amanda to speak to, because she was the one who led us through this previously. So we'll start that, and then I'll have the rest of my my manager's updates.
Sure. Would you like me to pull it up on screen so we can all kind of review what we have thus far?
Yeah, why don't you do that?
All right, so this is what we have so far. I have January through May visible. And so these are all ideas that either Jeff and I thought would be useful or that were brought up in discussion, I believe it was in November. And so we just have these placed in the spots we estimate there'll be time to speak on them. As you all know, this is just a loose guidance for the year because things do change and sometimes presenters aren't available at certain times. We can't really predict that later in the year. So this is what we have for January through May. And then July is to be decided since Independence Day is pretty close to our meeting. And then the second half of the year. And then do note that the master plan and the South County transfer station projects will be added to meeting agendas throughout when we meet certain milestones or have certain information to share. So with that, I don't know if there's anything you want to discuss or add or change about the work plan.
Additions?
Chris, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just noticing that the education and outreach presentation moved to April. I think it had previously been in March, and I'm just wanting to call attention to that because we're happy to go sooner as Public Health and Social Services Education and Prevention team. And April, your meeting tends to be is on schedule for the first week of each month. The first week in April happens to be the school break week, and for those of us who have school-age kids, that's typically a time to try to get away while the kids don't have school going on. So I just wanted to let you know about that. I know that a couple of us on my team have kids who are at that age where we might be gone the first week in April. So I don't know if that would mean that you'd want to shift the meeting date for April or move us to a different meeting for that update.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, this chair has missed both of those meetings in my term, so.
Yeah, Jeff, do you think it would be a problem to keep the E&O item on March?
Yeah, that I'll need to check with April Lee just to make sure, because I think I recall that April was a better month for her, but well, let me check. And
we were also thinking that March looks a little packed, but maybe we can flip some things around. So, and I also want to take note that we added another one to September. So it'll be kind of a biannual thing.
Okay.
How about if we get back to you? I want to check with April as far as her and her staff and if she's going to be ready for it in March or not, because that's at the very beginning of March. So, and it has to do with she has some new staff, and I'll talk about that shortly. So they'll just be getting up to speed, and that has part of it to do with it. So,
Chris, we'll definitely be in contact with you to find out what works best for everyone. If we have to break up the presentations to a little bit in March and a little bit in April, or figure out what works, we won't exclude you.
That's great. And I'm sure Patrick would love to be able to share about and report on his program as well. I don't know which month would work better for him, but thank you for the consideration, and appreciate you guys thinking about that.
Any other ideas or things you want to look at?
I just might mention that I think we want to watch the legislative actions real close, because I think we're probably going to see some impacting rules and regulations that we're going to have to be addressing. And I think I think the closer we can follow it, the better off we are.
Yeah, I agree, Delroy. So if we could try to move that post-legislative review at least to May. I know now we have that April conflict that's kind of wondering if we should just move April to the second week, but I don't know how that works for people's calendars. Renee?
I'm just curious about what Delroy suggested. As we're watching things play out over the course of the legislative session, if there's something we're concerned about, what's the pathway through which we impact that? Do we go to the BOCC and ask them to deal with it? Do we go to the Association of Counties and ask them to deal with it? What's our pathway to resolution?
That's a good question, because I don't know that we are allowed to have our own legislative agenda, right?
I don't think we can. And so but I think it's important that we pay attention. I'm just wondering sort of what our pathway is, or if that's even appropriate. I don't know.
Jeff, or folks that have been around longer than is there a precedent for that?
I think if any of the members on this group wanted to give feedback to a legislative committee or something, they would need to do that as definitely not representing this group. It would have to be either represent, so for those of you that represent a city, if that was appropriate for you to represent the city's interests that way, or for others just as a private citizen to comment on it. But basically, to make any sort of representation from the SWAC would have to officially take a position on, it's probably not really appropriate, or not likely that you would be able to on a 60-day session, not likely you'd be able to meet, take a position, kind of get that all through and be able to get to a committee to express that position, because as you know, these things happen lightning fast.
Yeah, and it wasn't my position to promote or project the legislation. My thought was more on let's watch the legislation real close, because some of these changes are going to have some impact on the county, and things don't happen overnight, and depending how fast the legislation is implemented, and my thought is the more you know about it, the better you can deal with it.
And I think that's a great point from Delroy there. We're an advisory committee, so I think our obligation here is to monitor these things and advise the BOCC on what's coming up and what the impacts are going to be to the county systems. There's a couple with the organics thing that I'm tracking pretty closely that will definitely impact the county system. And so, I really feel like it's our responsibility not to take a stance on any of those things outside of advising the county board on how it's going to impact our system and what we need to think about and maybe do, or what they need to do as far as a position on the matter.
Well, and I think Greg just got to the point that I was trying to get to, just escalating it to them and letting them deal with it. But if we're watching things that we know are going to have either a very positive or a very, very negative impact on the county, I think it's our responsibility to share that with them.
Yeah. Is there a weekly update from Paul that you get at the staff level that could be forwarded out to the SWAC?
Well, I will be, he does a weekly, we'll soon be starting a weekly like Zoom or Teams meeting just to kind of give updates. Now, what he may have written, if he has written materials that we receive or emails, we could definitely move that forward.
Well, I think for this conversation, I just asked that, you know, if there's a way to communicate with us regularly, that would be ideal. That's what I'm hearing. And then, you know, from the staff end, if there's anything that elevates to sort of the, you know, without an agenda, you know, critically impacting our ability to operate, you know, from a financial or an operational perspective, to highlight that. And then Jeff and the chair can work with Carolina to see if we can get a nod from, you know, we need you to go testify, or we need to have the county put in comment. Or if you need help from the SWAC members for any of that, you know, they could kind of work through their assistants and Romero really quickly if it's a big concern item. Does that make sense to everyone? Carolina, does that work from the way your office works in the session? I don't know. I know you have a lot during sessions. So.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. Did that get to, and then moving up the post-session review as well? I think that's the other part of Delroy's request. So good,
Right.
good discussion.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that to have a high quality presentation that Paul Jewell is able to offer us, sometimes we just have to juggle around when he's available. There's Paul gives really great information. So I don't want to, you know, if he's not available in May, then just have one of us do it or something. I'd love to have Paul back. So I'll check with him to see what he's available. Sometimes at the end of session, he's just really, really busy.
Perfect. Okay, anyone else with ideas or thoughts around the work plan? Amanda, can you scroll down and show us I think there's a couple floating things as well.
Yeah, so those are here in the note section. And those are just there because they're obviously big items coming this year, and we just don't know when we'll be ready to talk about them.
Okay. So I just have one more, and that's to get someone to come either from the county or from TRPC to update us on the county-wide climate action plan and its implementation. So that might be a good one for, you know, mid-year or later in the year when we have time on the agenda.
I think it's scheduled for August.
Oh, you already have it. Sorry, I missed it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no worries. I'm glad that we have it there.
Nice. We already talked about it, I think. I just forgot. Okay, anything else? Okay, so just if you have additions or thoughts about things we should be looking at or digging into for our work plan, get them to Amanda or Jeff, and we'll get them inserted into the version for adoption in February. And we'll do that before we do officer elections. Okay, Jeff, what else you got?
All right. Yeah, just a few little updates. As I think I may have mentioned, we've been doing a bit of recruiting lately. We've had a whole bunch of open positions. So the first ones is we were recruiting for 2 new education and outreach specialists. It's a series of, we have education outreach 1s, 2s, and 3s. So we had 2 ENO 2 positions that were open. So basically, we completed the interviews in mid-December, and we have filled those 2 positions, with 1 internal candidate and 1 external candidate. So the internal candidate is, and he's on this call, Rob Pudner. He was moving up from an ENO 1 to an ENO 2. So congratulations to Rob. All right.
Congratulations.
And so, yeah, and then the other one is an external candidate who has given us verbal that she's accepting the job and should start around February 1st. but hasn't notified her other employer yet, and it is in the area. So I'm not going to say the name and what agency they're from yet until she has the opportunity to notify her employer, so it doesn't get there secondhand. So we're excited about that candidate as well. So Rob officially began his new position or duties as of beginning of this year, so just earlier this week. So that means we now have an E&O 1 position. His former position is now open, and that will advertise this, I think, this coming weekend or Monday. So we have another position open. Then once we fill that, we will be fully staffed for the first time in a very long time with our 3 E&O education outreach court specialists. So I'm excited about that. So by March, we should have a full staff of education and outreach folks for waste reduction and recycling. I'm pretty excited. The other one that we been recruiting for is for a senior program manager. I know I talked about it previously. We didn't get a lot of applications for it. We actually went out pretty wide as well. We interviewed several individuals. One of those in the first round of interviews, one of those was moved forward. At second interview, the panel decided that wasn't the direction we wanted to go. So we have reposted that position late last week, and it's an open continuous recruitment. So we're hoping to see, we hope that we get some qualified candidates so we can get that filled. And so we'll see. I was a little disappointed that we weren't able to fill it just yet. So that's it for recruitment. So we've had a couple others as well. We just also hired a new toll house operator. Excited about our new employee there. And an environmental operations technician, which he'll be starting next Monday, who will be working out at the work, particularly assisting our other environmental operations techs with the maintaining and monitoring of the old closed landfill and our leachate and gas and stormwater systems. That individual will also be filling in when needed down at Hazel House. So when we have somebody is sick or something like that, and we need another person to staff that down there, they will work there. And probably most importantly is they'll be working closely with our newly hired public works asset manager to help put together our asset management program. So they'll be out doing a lot of identifying and of our various assets that solid waste has, as well as assessing their condition. And it's a huge job, but a very important one. So that's going to be a big piece of what this new employee is going to be doing. So after that, I don't know if anybody has any questions. So we have a couple positions open out there if you're interested, if you want to apply for senior program manager and an E&O 1. So just so you know, or if you know of somebody who might be appropriate or good for that position. Next up is, I want to mention this. So as you notice that, and typically you get that this at our SWAC meetings, that this meeting is being recorded on Zoom. So starting with this meeting today, the recordings of this meeting will be available to view on the Thurston County's YouTube channel. So yeah,
moving up in the world.
I know. So it's kind of exciting about that. So before it's been on our just our website, but it's I think this will be a lot easier to view, and it's more readily available. And the YouTube channel is fairly highly visited. Which leads me into the next item, which is talking trash videos. Speaking of our YouTube channel, if you go there, you'll basically see we have a series of short videos called Talking Trash, created and produced and I guess voiced and videoed by our own Rob Pudner. So about various waste reduction and recycling topics. So I know last couple of weeks actually, when you went to the YouTube channel, that Talking Trash autoplayed. It was the first thing you saw, and it started playing right away. So it got real high visibility. And I know in December, the topics focused particularly on things related to the holidays. I know the most recent one was related to Christmas tree recycling. They're typically 2 to 4 minutes in length, and they're on a specific subject. And they normally will come out weekly. Ah, I heard that. Somebody went to YouTube. Yes, and that's what when you go to YouTube, the county's YouTube channel, it's right there. So anyway, if you have the opportunity, there's, I believe, about 7 or 8 videos that are currently on site from on various different subjects, to waste less, to Christmas, to again Christmas tree recycling, to I think we had what to do with my mattresses are in there. There's been a wide variety of subjects and more to come. So I watched for that. They're informative and entertaining. And lastly, I just kind of want to give a little winter weather recap for our operations for over the last, 8, 9 days, almost 10. So we fared better than, I know the roads have been a real challenge. With the event that started on Sunday, December 26th, we were able to keep the work open every day, thankfully. However, from that Sunday through last Thursday, we did have to close early because the site conditions just got so icy on the deck that with customers getting out and having to hand unload, and as well as our contractor had a spotter that walks around and assists people. It was just a little too treacherous for them to move around on there. So last Sunday, a week ago, Sunday the 26th through last Thursday, we closed at 3 because it started getting too slick. We were able to actually, conditions improved for last Friday. We were able to be open full time, as well as Sunday and forward. All our facilities have been open regular schedule. Additionally, on Tuesday of last week, Rochester Dropbox was not open, and then on Friday, the Rainier Dropbox was not open again for those same conditions. But again, as of Sunday, all 3 facilities were open. They were open all day. It was not the most wonderful conditions out there, but they were manageable and workable. So we are back up and operating full schedule, full staff. Some of those days when we were out running at the work, we were on skeleton crew, but we got it done. And we just want to make sure that I know that Pacific Disposal didn't necessarily haul every day, but I didn't know Olympia ran every day. So we want to make sure that we were there for you guys and the public as well, that needed to get out there and take care of their waste. So just want to give you a little update that we made it. It was very challenging, had a lot of issues, but we got through, and things are melting out now and much better.
Can I just hop in for a second and say the Olympia app, the Recycle Coach, was really useful. I think Ron Jones may lead that. It sent out notifications that I received, so I knew what was going on with my waste hauling. So as a resident of Olympia, thank you for that.
And that's my update, unless anybody has any other questions.
Questions for Jeff? Well, I just want to really lift up everyone in your team and the private haulers and the public haulers. We kept garbage moving, I think, as well as we could, or solid waste moving as well as we could, given the circumstances. And while there was some missed things, everyone was doing what they needed to be safe. And I think the fact that we got everyone through that alive and well and kept the system running like we did is pretty impressive. So please pass that along to all of your line staff, Jeff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Same goes for our private haulers if you're on, and Gary. It's a big deal that we got through that and got our waste picked up. I have friends in New Orleans, and they didn't get their trash hauled for almost 2 weeks after the last hurricane. So good job.
I have a quick question for Jeff.
Sure.
Yeah, this is not so of immediate stuff, but long term. I know we picked the county picked the RFP for the new solid waste contract. Have they been in? Is that in contract now? And it's kind of 2 questions here, because you mentioned when you do the redesign of the work, that the contractor will be weighing in on those operational costs and so forth. So the first question is the county in contract yet with the new contractor? And then what's the timing on the work redesign? Does that just kind of fall with a new contract, or is that 4 years down the road?
Sure, I'll address that. First off, that's not under contract. It's going to need to go to a public first, we're going to be meeting with the Board of County Commissioners in executive session to go over the draft version of it next week. It'll still have to go through a public hearing process, which has yet to come. So, so that we don't have the exact dates on that at this point yet. But that's that process. We're still in process. The work redesign. I don't know if I can give you a specific time frame, but it's not necessarily tied directly to the timing on the contract. That's going to take a little while to go through, permitting, design, construction to get there. It would definitely affect the agreement because the operations would be different than than they are exactly right now. But we have to address that at a later point in time. But yeah, but the answer to your first is that it's not in contract yet. It's still it's in draft and has more process to go through.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions?
Anything else for Jeff? Okay. With 1 minute left, anything for the good of the order?
One quick thing, really quick. We consistently have challenges recruiting an industry rep to this committee. And I've just really noticed lately that the industry sector of warehousing, distribution, that sort of thing is really growing in the county. If we could maybe reach out to some of those organizations, they're big and they're big for us. And it seems like it would be nice to have someone from that industry at the table.
So like the big box distribution centers?
Yeah, like, Fastenal a couple of years ago moved from Pierce County to Thurston County. They've been here a couple of years now. They might have their feet on the ground enough to be, useful and bring good information to the table. Yeah, I'm thinking about those kinds of things.
Good idea.
Good idea.
Well, and maybe there's, on that vein, Jeff, within your team or within the team at Public Health, maybe there's customers we have that we know would be a really good fit. And so maybe that's a good question at the staff meetings in both of those teams to kind of pass on what Renee just said and see, because those folks are going to be kind of big hazardous waste disposers,
Exactly.
anyway. And maybe we have a really good customer that would be a good fit that cares about, the work we're doing. Good idea, Renee.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy New Year. Oh, Amanda, the appointments are not on our calendars past March. So if you can extend that out, that would be great.
Will do.
Okay. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Take
Thank you,
care.
everybody.
Everybody have a good
Bye-bye,
time.
everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.